1, 2, 3. Getting better. Oh, hey! I was just working on my Bobby Knight impressions.
Technicals. Looky here, looky here.
Welcome to Flynn Dog Woodwork. This is Brian. Today we're going to take a look at 8 fairly cheap woodworking accessories that I use almost on a daily basis. So let's take a look at them and see how they work. So the first thing we're going to talk about is something that we're going to be using in every single project that we do, and that's the pencil. Now when I start off to break down rough lumber, I used to always reach for the carpenter pencil. Now there's one problem with this. This has got graphite lead, which can be really hard to see when you're working with darker colored hardwoods. That's where the Fat Boy by FastCap comes into play. This thing has got a 5.5 millimeter lead, and it's extremely sturdy and won't break on you. But the really nice thing about this pencil is it comes with a variety of different colored leads. It comes with your standard graphite lead. It also comes with a red lead, as well as a white lead, which is great for walnut and some of those darker woods. So let's take a look and see what it looks like. So here's a close look at the pencil itself. It's simply a mechanical pencil that pushes the lead down as you push the eraser. Now the nice thing about this is the lead is extremely easy to switch out. And as I said before, it comes with a variety of different types of lead. For instance, if we need to switch out to the white lead, you simply open it up and slide it in. Now another nice thing about this Fat Boy is if you unscrew the eraser, there's actually a lead sharpener in the bottom of this eraser. You can simply place the eraser over the lead, twist it, and it's as good as new. So let's take a look to see how these different colored leads show up on our wood. So I'll be using this tabletop that I'm working on to show you exactly what it looks like. I've got the graphite lead here, and we're going to mark on this wood. So here I've got some cherry, and as you can see, it's very easy to see. I've got some white oak here, but once you get into the darker colors like this walnut and this babinga, it can be a little difficult to see. So let's switch out the lead to a white lead, and we'll show you how much clearer it is to see those markings. All right, now I've got a white lead in there, and you can see by just marking on this wood how much clearer that white lead is. For those of you that are curious to see what the red lead looks like, let's take a look at that. Here it is on the cherry, the oak, the babinga, more oak, and lastly the walnut. All of these show up very clearly, and you could use the red or the white for the darker colored hardwoods. Next up on my list is medium thick Starbond black. Now this is something that I use quite frequently when I'm dealing with knots like this one right here. Since knots tend to be not as stable as the actual board itself, I always try to stabilize these with a little bit of epoxy. And the nice thing about this medium thick Starbond black epoxy is you don't have to color it, and you can simply pour it into a little divot, spray it with a little bit of activator, and sand till it's ready. So let's take a look to see how this epoxy works on this crack in this walnut. Not only can it be used for knots, but it can also be used to fill cracks. So I'm going to add just a little bit of epoxy to this little piece of scrap, and we're just going to fill in this little area here because I don't want to waste the epoxy. Then we simply take our activator spray and spray onto the epoxy. Now this cures very quickly. Now within 20 seconds to 30 seconds, the epoxy should be fully cured, and then we can go back with the sander. Now this is very hard to see, but that crack is completely filled and smooth to the touch. And that's what happens every single time I use this. It creates a slick surface that's completely stabilized the wood. Now let's talk a little bit about shop safety. Now I know I'm not always the best at shop safety. I get comments all the time about wearing flip-flops around the shop, but that's just how I am. So I've got a couple of feather boards here. First off, I've got this mag switch feather board, which I started off with, and this is a little bit more expensive, mainly because it's got these super strong rare earth magnets that hold the actual feather board to your cast iron table. What I've come to find that's really a better option is this hedgehog feather board. This allows you to use it on boards with various size widths and adjust the feather board without a lot of preparation. So let me show you how this works. So here I'm going to compare the two feather boards. First off, let's start with the mag switch. Now the one nice thing about the mag switch is you can place it anywhere on your table and lock it down by twisting these two knobs. And it's fairly secure. If I move my fence over and use this test board, you can see how the mag switch cradles the wood and prevents it from slipping back if there's kickback. Now if I had a different width board, I would have to untighten these two knobs, move it to that width, and then retighten it, and then maybe have to make some micro adjustments. Now the difference between this mag switch featherboard and the hedgehog featherboard is quite simple. Let me show you. First off, you put it into your miter slot and it slides right in. Now if I put my same test piece in, I simply place it until it's fairly secure against the workpiece and tighten it down. Now that that's in place, I can push my wood through the table saw and know that it's fully secured and fully supported with this hedgehog. Now if I have a different size width board, it's very easy to change. I simply unscrew it, adjust it, and tighten it back down. Then my larger piece of wood is fully supported once again without having to do any micro adjustments. The next thing on my list is something that I'm just starting to get into, and that's using epoxy for deep pours as well as using it for tabletop epoxy. And that's where this cheap scale comes into play. Now the nice thing about this scale is when you're pouring your mixes, you can set the cup on top and zero it out so that the cup is no longer included in the weight. This creates a situation where your epoxy pours are perfectly mixed and you don't have too much of one part and not enough of the other. Next up, I'm going to talk about something that I just recently discovered, and that's this Rockler glue glider. It's got this nice textured roller which allows you to evenly spread glue on any workpiece that you're doing. You can see how it evenly spreads the glue across the workpiece and creates a situation where you don't have to break out this little brush every time you're doing large glue ups. The other nice thing about this bottle is it's got a little lid here. You simply take it off the back and put it into the little crack where the glue is dispensed, and it seals your glue and saves it for later. The next thing on my list is kind of a two-for-one, and that's these spring-loaded center hole punch as well as this tight little pointed scribe. Now let me show you exactly how these work. So I find myself using this spring-loaded center hole punch all the time, mainly when installing things like hinges, and I want to line up where the actual screws will go on the hinge. It's very easy to use. You simply place your hinge, push down, and you mark your 3 holes. I'll fill them in here with the pencil just so that you can see them. And now we can go away and pre-drill the holes for the hinge, and we won't have any problems finding out exactly where those holes need to be. Now the other thing I have is this little scribe tool, and this is simply just a sharp pointed edge that I'll use to actually increase these divots by pushing in, and this will create a situation that will allow me to place my drill bit directly into that hole and find it very easily. The other nice thing about this scribe tool is that the opposite tip of it is magnetic. The main reason I like this is because when you're dealing with hinges, a lot of times you're dealing with screws that are extremely small, tiny, and they can easily get lost. But you can simply place them on the tip of this scribe, and it creates a situation where your screws are easily within reach. So for years, when I needed to fill in a crack or any sort of gap in between a wood, I would go to Home Depot and purchase plastic wood. Now I'm sure you've all seen this, and this does an okay job. The problem is, when you're working with hardwoods, you can't really stain this wood filler, and that's where the problem lies. So there's a better solution than this, and I'll show you exactly what that is. And it's these wood fillers made by TIMBERMATE. I've got a variety of these in my shop, anywhere from red oak to mahogany to maple to cherry, and of course my favorite, walnut, which always seems to be the hardest to match. So the nice thing about TIMBERMATE is that it's water-based. So if it ever dries out or you ever have a problem with it being too dry, you simply add a few drops of water into the canister, and within just 30 minutes or so, it's back to normal and fully hydrated. Let me show you exactly how this looks on a piece of walnut. So this is something you could also use that epoxy trick that I was showing you earlier as well. But if it's not structural and it's just cosmetic, I would highly recommend using the TIMBERMATE. So here we're going to take our walnut TIMBERMATE and we're going to fill in the hole. And this one is actually a little too dry, so I'm going to put some water in it and we'll let it sit for a bit, and it should be as good as new. I do have this canister over here that hasn't been used that should be in workable condition. I simply spread on top of the walnut, filling the gap as much as I can, And then I'll take a little scraper and push it into the seam. You always want to make sure that this wood filler is completely above the crack that you're trying to conceal. Therefore, when you sand it away, the crack will be removed. So I'm going to let this sit here for about 10 to 15 minutes. It should be fully cured by then, and then we can hit it with the sander. Alright, now that the TIMBERMATE wood filler has cured, I'm going to take some 120, and I'm just going to lightly sand this. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but you can't even tell that that crack was there. Alright, the last thing on my list is something that I don't think every woodworker has, and that's simply a moisture meter. Now I take this with me every single time I go to the lumber yard, just to make sure that my lumber is completely dry and it's able to use once I get it back into my shop. Now I've had most of this hardwood in my shop for a couple months at least, so it's had time to acclimate to my shop setting. Now when I go through and I test the moisture content of each one of these boards, this oak right here is at 4.9%. This maple is at 5.6%. This mahogany is at 5.6%. So all of those readings are within usable amounts. Now I dare you to get one of these and go into Home Depot. Now you will find that the moisture content on all of that construction lumber, including pine, is well above 25, maybe 23%. So that tells me that that wood has the ability to shrink, warp, and create a situation where your project is going to turn out all janky in the end. So I highly recommend one of these, especially if you're going to buy hardwoods. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed watching these cheaper accessories that you can buy for your workshop that may save you a buck or two in the long run. So I'll see you again next time. Well, thanks again for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed watching these cheap must-have accessories for your workshop. If you get a chance, I'd love to get your subscription and leave a like. Also, hit that notification bell so you can be informed of when the next video drops. Thanks again, and take care as always.